It is Lock It Up Sports Talk. My name is Logan Lockhart here on the Fines Huddle Network. Joining me, Chris Faria. He's our hockey guest. He comes here every once in a while. He's back again to talk a little Toronto Maple Leafs as, you know, we're making our way through the season here. Shortened season. It's going by pretty quickly. I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying the format, the scheduling. We'll see what Chris thinks. Again, we do this every Wednesday, 1 o'clock live. You can find it on all platforms. We're currently streaming live on Twitter, where a lot of you may be watching right now. Okay, let's do this. Chris, how you doing today?
Terrific. How are you, Logan?
I'm doing well. Thanks for coming again. Always enjoy your insight. And we got to address what's going on in Montreal. We just have to. Claude Julien, gone. Kurt Muller, gone. And now the reports are coming out that this decision was made before last night. So last night wasn't the final straw for the Habs. They lose to the Sens again, not in regulation. So they do get a point again. But this changes very quickly. Now, isn't it amazing how things change?
I know, right? Like only a few short weeks ago, people were talking about the Habs being a juggernaut in this division, right? They were, arguably the hottest team in the division. They looked better than the Leafs, at least at 5-on-5 through the first few weeks of the season. And they go through this one cold stretch, lose a couple games to Ottawa, and the whole narrative shifts. And now there's obviously that big coaching change. Not sure I'm a fan of the move personally. I've always been a huge proponent of Claude Julien. I think he's one of the best coaches in the league. I think he gets the most out of his players. I think he's made the Habs one of the most difficult teams to play against. They're very stout defensively, tenacious on the forecheck. I'm not sure that any other coach is gonna be able to have that same impact. I think the coaching change itself sometimes sends a message to the players, helps them wake up. They might go on a bit of a hot streak now because of that, but I think in the long run they really lost a good one in Julien.
He's gonna get a job. We know that.
Oh, absolutely.
Right away. Well, not right away. We'll see. It's up to him. But, it's all in his hands. Now, don't you think that if Montreal played up to expectations and really continued this whole narrative of being a juggernaut, he would have won Coach of the Year. He would have won the Jack Adams.
Yeah, I think if they could have kept it up for the whole season, finished first or second in the Canadian division, he was definitely going to be a nominee. Like the guy, you could almost argue every season he should be a nominee with what he's done in his career. I really think he's probably one of the top 3 to 5 coaches in the league.
This is obviously very relevant to the Leafs because at one point we were saying to ourselves, in this North Division, it's Toronto and Montreal. And that's how it's going to be down the stretch. If you're going to have 2 teams battling out in the playoffs to decide who will go to the conference finals, it will be Toronto and Montreal. That has completely shifted. Now it's more about, I guess, Toronto and Edmonton, right? And the Leafs are going to see Edmonton in just a little bit here starting on Saturday. But you think Montreal made a mistake?
Definitely. Like I said, I just think Julien he's one of those coaches that's able to get, the absolute best out of his players. I think, Montreal's a solid team on paper. They have tons of depth, pretty good defensively, but they lack that elite, offensive talent. But I still think Julien was able to, find a way to get those, kind of ragtag depth players to come together, create some offense on the forecheck. I think they're one of the best teams at the cycle game down low. And I think a lot of that was Julien. So we're going to see, over the rest of the season, are they going to improve without him? Are they going to stagnate, or what's going to happen? But I don't feel great about their chances now.
Yeah, I was shocked by the move. Usually when a coaching change happens, you may be shocked, but you can say to yourself, okay, now it makes sense. I can kind of see where they're coming from here. For me, this is out of left field. I don't get it. I'm with you completely. I think Claude's a great coach. I think he does get the most out of his players. And now here we go again with Patrick Roy, who this seems like a marriage waiting to happen. We've been talking about it for years, it seems, how he's got to coach the Habs one day. He's back in the conversation of being a candidate here to be hired full-time. In Colorado, wasn't smooth for Patrick Roy. Does he get another chance?
I'm going to say no. I think the next permanent coach is probably going to be Bergevin's last shot at this. I mean, he's been with the Habs for what, 8-9 years now. He's been through seems like a handful of coaches so far. So I think he really needs to get this next one right. I think Patrick Roy, he might get a shot in the future, but I think he is a gamble as it is. He's not a proven commodity at the NHL level. So I think Bergevin would be a bit wiser to go with, someone who has a proven track record of success.
All right, now Toronto Maple Leafs loss against Calgary, and when you look at it in reality, it's because Calgary. It was a must-win game for Calgary. I mean, Calgary had to win that game. There was no ifs, ands, or buts. They were going to come out strong, and they were just a better team. The Leafs got beat. Okay, we get over it tonight, though. What do you need to see different? I saw you said that you felt bad for Austin Matthews. He was in the mix of this historic point streak, at least in franchise history. After the game, the Leafs get shut out. Why did you feel bad for Austin Matthews?
Well, yeah, mostly just about the point streak. I think he works his butt off every single game. You can just see like the guy's carrying this team at this point. Like, yeah, they're a great team from top to bottom, but Matthews is the guy running the show. The point streak tells it all. The goal streak tells it all. The guy's elevated his game to just that elite level where he's either 1 or 2 in the entire league, and it's awesome to watch. And I think seeing him set the record for the Leafs point streak would have been absolutely amazing. So it's unfortunate that we didn't get to see that, but still historic run, and I'm sure he's going to hop on a new one pretty soon.
Let me pivot here, and we'll get back to current Toronto Maple Leaf stuff, but I'm thinking about Morgan Reilly right now, and he needs a contract soon. What are your impressions on this and what he's going to demand as a free agent? Forget the open market, but if it's just one-on-one of Toronto negotiations, what do you think he would demand and what would you pay him?
Yeah, it's a tough one, right? Because he's an offensive defenseman, but if you look at his career, he's really only had that one big breakout year a couple years back where I think he had about 72 points. Other than that, he's about a 50-point man. Not great defensively. But players like that tend to get paid pretty well. So I think he's making $5 million right now. He's probably going to ask for the $7 million range, I'd imagine. Pietrangelo got 8.8 on a long-term deal, so he's not at that level, but he's probably in the tier under that. 7.5 for 5-6 years. Would I be willing to pay him that? Personally, no. This is probably an unpopular opinion, but I would probably move on from Reilly after this contract. I think his best years are behind him in terms of his production and what he can offer the team. I think he's too leaky defensively to really make it worthwhile to give him such big money, especially when you already have all these big contracts on the team. And we can talk about some of those, like the Tavares contract is also looking a bit iffy now too.
Oh, we're going to get to it, believe me. With Reilly, though, is it the game that you're seeing lately with him? Let's say he was solid defensively this year and surprised you. Would you still have that opinion about giving him that contract?
If he was solid defensively, I would honestly be shocked, just because his entire career so far has been the same story, right? Where he drives offense, really well. Not as well this season. He's had a bit of a down year in terms of driving play, but the points are there, so it's nice. But he's always been pretty leaky defensively. If he did, somehow turn it around and maybe TJ Brody helped him out to find his defensive game, yeah, I would probably change my tune a bit. I think I'd still be, a bit wary of giving him a long-term contract just because he's getting a bit older. I think he's about 26. By the time he'll need a contract, he'll be 27, 28. So it's always tough giving those guys long-term deals. But yeah, if he could round out his game, it would definitely help his case a lot.
Now let's go to John Tavares. And this is the captain of the team. This is a guy who still, if you looked at it, just on face value, hey, he's producing, right? Look at the numbers. He's still putting up the points. He's close to point per game, if not point per game. But there's something missing. And usually if a point per game player, there'd be no complaints, right? But what are the complaints of Tavares in Leafs Nation right now? Give me the lowdown on him.
Yeah, so people can make a ton of arguments about Tavares, right? Like, yeah, he's producing points. but maybe he doesn't look good. What's the problem? It all comes down to one pretty simple thing. It's 5-on-5.
Right.
You look at his production. I'll pull it up here. At 5-on-5 in 284 minutes, 2 goals, 7 points. Let's compare that to some of the stars on this team. Mitch Marner, 7 goals, 19 points. Austin Matthews, 11 goals, 18 points. Even Alex Kerfoot has 9 points. Kerfoot is outscoring Tavares at 5-on-5. So to me, that's been the main issue. Why is this the case? Why is this happening? Well, to me, it kind of looks like he's kind of fighting the puck a bit. I see a lot of plays dying on his stick. I'm not sure why that is. Is that a lack of confidence? Is he simply declining? It's hard to say. I think his first year in Toronto, he was obviously outstanding. Almost scored 50 goals. Looked like he was an $11 million player. What they paid for. Last season, I think there was a bit of a decline. Wasn't quite the same player. And I think this season we're seeing even more of a decline. Like you said, the points are still there, but they're mostly on the power play. And when you're making that kind of money, you need to be dominant at 5-on-5, and he just hasn't been.
Look at McDavid and Draisaitl, right? What do we see there? We see a 1-2 punch. 2 different lines. In Toronto, you look at the money that guys are making here, and you're saying to yourself, hey, the Leafs should have a 1-2 punch of themselves. Matthews, Tavares, it's not there, right? It's the Mitch Marner and Austin Matthews show, night in, night out. And hear me out here. But don't you think that the best thing the Leafs can do right now is play Mitch Marner of John Tavares and go back to Matthews, Nylander, Hyman, right? Don't you think? And Marner Matthews is spectacular, right? But let's serve the team the best way we can right now. Don't you think that that's not a crazy thing to throw out there? Break up Marner Matthews. Tavares needs Marner to play with him, clearly.
Yeah, I think it's a fair idea, at least to experiment for a few games at least. I think we saw last game Tavares was playing on the top line, which was they're obviously trying to get him going. They're trying to get his confidence back up, get him some points on the board. So clearly Keith is open to experimenting and getting this guy some points. I have heard that the Leafs are in the market for a top 6 forward. So I think they're trying to get someone on Tavares' wing. They're trying to bring someone in. I know Elliot Friedman was talking about Mikael Granlund from the Predators as a potential option. He's only making $3.75 million. So the Leafs are tight on cap, so they could make something like that work.
It's always been about secondary scoring, right, with this team right now. And Kerfoot, he had a really tough stretch. He seems to be turning it on a bit. We like him as a winger, right? I think that's where he's best served. And then at the same time, this team has seen injuries, okay? And they're not getting it as bad as other teams. Let me make that very clear. But you got games when Hyman's out and Thornton's out and Simmons is out, right, for multiple weeks. I think that, and I heard Sheldon Keefe say it, he said he was asked about the vision of his team. And when Joe Thornton was injured, he said, well, when Joe's not in the lineup, it changes a lot of that. So when you have guys going in and out of the lineup, it does kind of change things, but you do need that consistency from John Tavares to be a dominant player. He's not dominant anymore. We have to come to grips with that. Do you think there's people in denial who just won't come to grips with that whole idea?
Yeah, I'm probably because like I said, his first year in Toronto, he was dominant. He was $11 million and above. He was arguably better than Matthews still at that point. Last year, I think he was still close to point per game. I think he looked fine last year. He didn't look the same as he did his first year, but he was fine. And then this year, yeah, it's only been 20 games or whatever, but it's not promising so far. Does he have time to turn it around? Yeah, for sure. Maybe just like I said, maybe he just needs a shake up, a new winger. Maybe like you said, he needs Mitch Marner to maybe spark a fire again for him. But yeah, something's got to give a 5-on-5. The guy has to find his game. Like they need him down the stretch here. They need that 1-2 punch.
Well, wasn't it funny? Tavares was in this huge cold streak. And this was the Ottawa game, and then Marner goes on the line in the third period and Tavares scores right away. Now, again, when you talk about that big season, 47 goals, whatever it was in his debut year in Toronto, It was Marner Tavares, and that line was dynamite. It really was. If you want to get Tavares going, I wouldn't overthink it. I would put Marner back on his line.
Yeah, I think it can't hurt. At least, give him 3-4 games, see what happens. Can't hurt you.
And I can say the same thing about Nylander and Matthews too, right? That's another combo that's been dynamite in the past.
Yeah, and you could argue the same for Nylander. Like, I think he's been a bit better than Tavares. It helps that he's only making $7 million, not 11, so the standards are a bit lower. But yeah, I think he needs to bring up his game too. We haven't seen the same kind of net drive as we saw last year. We haven't seen him shooting as much. I have a feeling it's also a confidence issue with him. Him and Tavares really have just struggled at 5-on-5, like I've said. So, a change of pace, maybe a change of line mates, it certainly can't hurt them.
Now let's talk about the Leafs in a general sense here in the NHL. If they were in, let's say, the East Division, how do you think they'd fare?
I think they're still definitely near the top. It's funny. I don't know if this is still the case, but a few days ago, if you look at the standings, all the Atlantic teams in a normal year are at the top of the NHL.
Yeah.
The Leafs are in first. The Panthers are in second. The Panthers of all teams, which is crazy. And then I know, Tampa and Boston are obviously always great. But people talk about the North Division as a bit of, a facade. Like, is Toronto really this good? Are they really, a top team in the league? They're maybe not the best team in the league. I think they've got to be in the conversation for, top 4, 5, 6 teams. I think if we saw, for example, if we saw Boston in this division, would it be much different? I think their record would probably be pretty similar.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and let's make it very clear. This is a really good Toronto team. And I think that they would have all the regular season success in the world. You throw them into any division. The question is when you get into the playoffs. And luckily for the Maple Leafs, they might run into an easier matchup in the playoffs than they would normally get because it's going to be within the division. So if you run into Winnipeg in the first round, and I'm not devaluing anything about Winnipeg, but that's better than running into Boston in the first round, right? So there are benefits to this whole idea. But with Edmonton, because the Leafs are going to see them next after the set ends in Toronto with the Flames tonight. With the Oilers, they're really turning it on. And I watched their game in Vancouver last night. They're playing with a lot of confidence. Mm-hmm. And there's something about that team right now that's clicking. We didn't see it earlier on in the year. We didn't even see it the last time the Leafs played the Oilers. And they beat the Leafs in that overtime game. But here we are now, and the Oilers are clicking. The Oilers are the biggest threat in the North Division. But how much of a threat to Toronto are they? Are they right there? Are they toe-to-toe with the Leafs? Or do you think they're a tier below?
For me, it's always going to be the Leafs and then the next tier. So when we talked before the season, I think I had Montreal, as the closest threat. And now, obviously, they've fallen off. And then it's kind of a mishmash where, Edmonton on any given night, they can look amazing or they can look not so great. Winnipeg on any given night, they can look pretty good or they can look not so great. So I think if you put Toronto in a series with Edmonton or any other Canadian team, Toronto's got to have the edge. I think, in a 1 or 2 game series, I think for sure Edmonton can outplay the Leafs. I think McDavid and Draisaitl can obviously take over any game. But the great thing about Toronto is they have Marner and Matthews. They can do the same thing. When Tavares is on his game, he can do the same thing. So they can basically fight fire with fire. They have no issues there.
Tavares has to be on his game because if you watched the Oilers last night, they were down 3-0. They're down 3-1 going into the third period, and they just strike like that. Boom. Vancouver takes a penalty. That's deadly. Boom. And you got a tie game. Draisaitl, McDavid, whoever it is. Okay, the Leafs, they need that punch. They need that Tavares. They need the quick strikes, right? Remember, earlier in the year, the Leafs were scoring in bunches. They were scoring about 10, 20 seconds apart. You got to kind of bring that energy back, and it's all about John Tavares.
For sure, yeah. Like they do kind of look like a one-line team at times, and it's great for the Matthews scoring streak. It's great for Marner to almost be leading the league in points. But like you said, for down the stretch, And in terms of long-term success, they're going to need, two serious scoring lines. I think they have gotten a bit lucky with their fourth line. It seems like Travis Boyd and Nick Petan have kind of come out of nowhere to really bring that fourth line to life. So that's been a nice little help. It's certainly going to help when Simmons comes back. He's actually been a very pleasant surprise. I was not expecting that at all. I know Thornton's been in and out with injuries, but he's helped a bit. So they've got the depth for sure. And just like you said, it's all about getting Tavares going, getting that 1-2 punch up the middle.
And we got to remember that once the playoffs come, guys like Thornton, guys like Simmons, these might be effective pieces. Impact guys. I know Simmons will, because Simmons been an impact guy from day one here. He really has. It's a pleasant surprise for both of us. Joe Thornton, I know that the Sharks, okay, we can say all we want about them in the playoffs, but I expect Joe Thornton to turn it up. And I expect John Tavares to really turn it up. And I'm not saying that based on, I don't think he'll do it. I think he will do it actually in the playoffs.
Yeah, they're going to need it, right? So he's wearing the C on his chest for a reason. He's getting paid $11 million for a reason, and it's for playoff hockey. It's down the stretch. The guy's been through it, He's played some tight series with the Islanders. He's played in a couple series, against the Bruins with the Leafs. So the guy knows playoff hockey. He knows what's expected of him, and he's a pro. So I think he's got to figure it out.
As the trade deadline approaches, what are the biggest needs for the Leafs? I know you talked about maybe another top six guy slotting in to play on the wing with Tavares, but any other needs that stand out to you?
Yeah, so if they could go for the winger, like I said, in that top six role. I'm just writing about this now, where the Predators are kind of having a bit of a fire sale over there. So I think Granlund's probably on his way out. It's a bit of a home run swing, but you could inquire about Philip Forsberg. I think he's making $6 million, so it's going to be tough, but could poke around there. Your next option is going to be maybe you just move Kerfoot up to second line wing. I think we've seen the Kerfoot, Tavares, Nylander line work before. I like the line. Then maybe you just want to add a third line center. So I haven't looked too deep into the options yet, but there's definitely going to be lots of third line centers available. I think I actually read Adam Henrique is available, and he's getting up there in age, but I think he's still a 20+ goal guy. Good defensive player, so maybe a couple options to look at there.
Yeah, he's a good player. I was actually shocked. I mean, I understand he's not making chump change down in Anaheim, so that's partially why, but he's a good player. He's a guy that probably will find a home. It's interesting because the third line on this team, we didn't see really the production that we wanted. Remember when the Leafs were playing Vancouver and they're really scoring a lot and they're looking like they're clicking on all cylinders, but the third line was absent from all the fun in those games. Is that why you kind of say, hey, maybe a third line center would work?
Yeah, I just think that third line's been kind of all over the place this season. They haven't really found that one, perfect combo like we've seen in the first line. Marner, Matthews, and anyone else you put there is going to work. On the fourth line, it seems like Spezza, Boyd, and Petan is probably the best combo. The second line, you have Tavares, Nylander, and you got to find that missing piece. Third line, it's been so many bodies in and out, right? Like I think VC has been really disappointing. I think you could probably find an upgrade there. I think I like Engvall as a player, as a third line center who's going to maybe take on some matchups. I'm not so sure.
Right.
And I know Sheldon Keefe would like that third line to be kind of a matchup line, with Hyman, maybe Kerfoot, on that line. And I just think they need that big body two-way center to kind of, who can play against those big players. And I don't think they have that right now.
There's been a lot of mixing and matching, a lot of different combos with this lineup. It reminds me a couple of years ago of the Blue Jays, where it was like a different lineup every day. 162 games, different lineup. Just trying to find that right combination. And with the Leafs and with Sheldon Keefe, we're seeing a lot of that. Again, he thinks Joe Thornton, big part of what he envisions this team to be. And it seems that, and we'll close with this, it seems as though Thornton with Matthews and Marner, that's kind of his go-to plan here. as we go down the stretch. It's looked good. It really has.
Yeah, and like you're saying, it's all about finding those perfect matchups. When Thornton came to Toronto, I thought he was actually going to be the third line center, or even fourth line center. I thought he was maybe going to be, given the Spezza treatment where he's playing down the lineup, maybe in and out of the lineup, depending on the game, depending on back-to-backs. But it seems like, they still think he's got game. They still think he's a top 6 player, and, kudos to him. It's actually worked out. He's looked pretty good in the few games he's played so far. But yeah, the key is going to be finding those perfect matchups for Toronto down the stretch.
Well, he's looked good, and he seems to have instant chemistry with Matthews and Marner. That's tough to find. Then again, this is a future Hall of Fame player, right? Look at where he is in age. He's the kind of guy that maybe can find that chemistry right away. We got to give him a little more credit than I think we have. Hyman back in the lineup today after missing Monday. And with the Flames, again, don't think that it was just a one-off, because they do kind of have to string some wins together here. So for the Flames, they're going to come out strong again. It's not just a one-game scenario with them. The Leafs, they got to start on time, right? That's the key today, start on time.
Yeah, for sure. That first goal is huge for them. I think Calgary's, they've been playing down. They haven't been getting the first goal pretty often. So if Toronto's able to get an early lead and assert their dominance, I think Calgary's going to be back on their heels, going to be doubting themselves. So that's always a big key to Toronto's game, is playing with the lead. And is Hutch still in net tonight?
I believe so. I believe Anderson is progressing, but that doesn't mean he's 100%. So, and I've also heard that Jack Campbell, he is progressing too. After a few weeks of not knowing what was going on with Jack Campbell, now finally, I think that there is progression in the crease.
Yeah. So I think the first goal is even more important if Hutch is going to be in net, because I think, as we saw last game, you can't really, trust that he's going to save, a lot of tough shots, because that first goal was rough. So Toronto's going to have to come out hot, hopefully score a couple early, and, help Hutch out a bit.
There he is, Chris Faria. Thank you again for joining me. Let everyone know where they can find you, follow you, read you, watch you.
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter at Chris Faria TO, and you can also find my work on the Hockey Writers if you just search up Chris Faria. Awesome,
Chris. Thank you very much. Big game today again, I'm telling you. And with Montreal, this is fascinating. Whenever there's a coaching change, always intrigued to see how the team comes out, especially for a team that was so hot out of the gate. It's very, very fascinating with Montreal. That is all for us here on Lock It Up Sports Talk. My name is Logan Lockhart. This is the Fines Huddle Network. We do this every Wednesday. We stream live at 1 o'clock on every platform, including Twitter, which a lot of you may be watching right now. Chris, thank you again. My name is Logan Lockhart. See you next week on Lock It Up. Until then, here we are, signing off.